Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Feiler, and in some very small way, I am partly responsible, I feel, for this event. A few years ago, I wrote a book called The Secrets of Happy Families, and when I finished it, I sent it to my cousin, AJ, and he agreed to interview me about the book on Amazon.com. And the last chapter of this book is called The Green Beret Guide to a Family Reunion. And I worked with the Green Berets to design an ideal family reunion. And the chapter included 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, get the money in advance. Number 2, have a designated purple person so that when the people from the red states and the people from the blue states start to fight, you put the purple person in between them. And number 3, plan the largest reunion in the planet and invite everybody on Earth to come. And that is what, in part, has brought us here today. So would you please join me in congratulating AJ on this wonderful event? Now, when I came out here to talk to you for a few minutes, my wife asked me to report that I have spent the last 7 years writing about happy families, not because I have one, but because I wanted one. In fact, this idea began in many ways. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and every summer my large extended family gathers for several weeks for a sort of Camp Feiler at the home on Tybee Island where we spend summers. And a few years ago, my wife and I are the parents of identical twin daughters, and they had just entered those years where we were no longer playing defense, we were ready to play offense, but we didn't know how to do them. We had lots of concerns. And my little sister came next, and she has adolescence, and she was worried about all those things that parents of teenagers are worried about, the internet and drinking and drugs and those sorts of things. And then my brother came, and he was worried about my parents and should we ask mom to stop driving at night? Is it time to put dad in a wheelchair? And we all gathered around the table that first night, and sure enough, all of these tensions came pouring out onto the table. I looked at my 12-year-old nephew, and he was texting under the table. Now I knew, trust me, I knew I shouldn't say anything, but I asked him to put away his device, and kaboom, it was as if a mushroom cloud had erupted. My sister snapped at me not to parent her children. My mom pointed out that from her point of view, none of the grandchildren had any manners. My dad observed it was my children who were balancing spoons on their noses. My brother said we could never have a conversation with all these kids around. And my wife went up to go get ice cream from the kitchen. And I said, but wait a minute, the kids haven't finished their vegetables. And at that point, everybody just went to different sides of the house and retreated into their own families. And that night, my dad called me to his bedside, and there was this quiver in his voice. He said, our family's falling apart. And I said, oh, no, we're not falling apart. We're stronger than ever. But lying in bed that night, I began to wonder, what is the secret sauce that holds families together? Where do I turn to make sure that my family works? And I asked my wife the next question, what do we do now? And it turns out this is a great time to ask that question. And in the last 7 years, I've been traveling around the world and talking to people about what makes their families work. And I've been asking a simple question. What makes your family happy, and what can I learn to make my family happier? I write about this in the New York Times every month. I gave a TED Talk that's been seen by 1 million people, and I have written this book called The Secrets of Happy Families. And I just want to give you a few ideas today as I build up before we all sing together in a few minutes. So when I set out, I made a promise to my wife, which I kept, which is I would only bring back ideas that people were doing. And I made one to myself that I broke, which is, I don't know about you, but I hate those lists of the 5 or 7 or 10 things that you have to do to have a happy family. I usually disagree with number 3, and I can't remember number 5, and I think my kids will never get into college. So I said, I'm not going to cram everything into one little list. But it turns out I kept hearing the same things over and over again. So I have a sort of non-list list of the things that all happy families have in common. So idea number 1, all happy families adapt all the time. Okay? What are the 2 busiest times in families? It's The two nuclear winters of family life is the hour after everybody wakes up and the hour before everybody goes to bed. And so how do we manage this very, very difficult time? A few years ago, I went to Boise, Idaho, to a small town in central Idaho, to this family that had created this morning checklist. And I saw this amazing thing, which is the mom got up at 6 in the morning, made herself a cup of coffee, sat in a chair as one after the other, her 4 children, ages 8 to 15, came downstairs, checked this morning list they had, made themselves breakfast, checked the list again, did their chores, they put their dishes in the dishwasher and did the laundry, checked the list again, made themselves lunch, checked the list again, and went to the school bus. And the mother was just sitting there saying, oh, have a good day, oh, I hope you have a good luck on your test, I hope you have a great sports practice. It was the single most astonishing family dynamic I had ever seen. And when I said, this will never work in our house, my kids need much too much prying and probing and screaming to get them out of the house in the morning, the mom said, that's what I thought. And I told that to my husband. He said, but trust me, adults love this. They love to make a check when they do something, and for kids, it's heaven. And the week we introduced this checklist in the morning into our family, it reduced parental screaming in half. Now, if I stay here long enough and someone will ask me, what's the secret to what's a happy family? I'm like, everybody can have their own, but reduced parental screaming is very high on my list. So the idea of change your family, have a morning checklist, have a meeting every week, talk about what it means to be part of your family. So that's the first idea I want to leave you with. Adapt all the time. The second thing that high-functioning families do is they talk a lot. And they don't just talk about difficult conversations. They talk about what it means to be part of a family, how you deal with money, how you deal with difficult situations. And I want to give you one idea that's the single most interesting idea in all the years I've been doing this. I wrote an article about this idea a few years ago in the New York Times. It was the most emailed article in the entire paper for an entire month. And the idea is this: tell your family history. One of the things I love about this event that AJ has put together is all the tents back there where you can engage your family history, learn to tell your story. It's deeply, deeply important to families. Researchers in Atlanta asked children 20 questions. It's called a Do You Know test. Do you know where your grandparents were born? Do you know an aunt? Where your parents met and went to high school? Do you know an aunt or an uncle who had cancer that they overcame? The children who scored highest on this test, which means the children who knew most about their family history, had the greatest belief that they could control their own lives and bounce back from difficulty. It was the number one predictor of a child's emotional well-being. Well, why is that? There are 3 types of family stories. There's the ascending narrative, right? We came from nothing. We worked hard. We have a lot. There's the descending narrative. We had a lot. There was a storm or a recession or a war, and we lost it all. Or there's what they call an oscillating narrative. Your grandfather worked hard. He built a big business, and then his house burned down. His son was the first one to go to college, and then his wife got sick and had to overcome her illness. The children who know that they come from an oscillating family narrative know that when they hit difficulties, and they're going to hit difficulties, they have to push through, they have to persevere, they have to get over the hurdle, and that happens in their family. So it's against all of our instincts, and we're here at this beautiful day, but I encourage you, open the cupboard, open the closet door, bring out your skeletons, talk to your children about what it means to be part of a family. So adapt all the time, talk a lot, and the last idea really embodies what this event is all about, and that is go out and play. It sounds the simplest, but it's actually the most important. All families have conflict. We're all going to fight. It's difficult at times. But what we know now about families is you want to spend less time worrying about what you do wrong and more time focused on what you do right. So find a family member, find a beautiful day like this, whatever you like to do. It might be hike or cook or watch movies or play games. Find a family member, make time, and make a memory. When I was in high school, I first read Leo Tolstoy's book, Anna Karenina, which has that famous line in the beginning, all happy families are alike, and each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. When I first read it, I thought this is a technical term, I thought it was idiotic. Of course, all happy families are not alike. Some are big, some are small, some are loud, some are quiet. But what we now know is that there are certain patterns that families have in common. When Leo Tolstoy was 5 years old, his older brother, Nikolai, came to him and said he'd inscribed the secret to universal happiness on a green stick, and he'd buried it in the family's backyard in Russia. And if he found it, all the world would be happy. Tolstoy spent his whole life looking for it and never found it. That's how that phrase ended up in the beginning of Anna Karenina. And he's buried there today, surrounded by green grass. And that, to me, embodies the last thing that I learned. Happiness is not something that we find, it's something that we make. You don't need to scrap what you're doing, you don't need to start over. You need to take small steps, accumulate small wins, and keep reaching for that green stick. So what's the secret to a happy family? It comes down to one word: try. And that's what AJ has done. It's what's brought you all here today. And so let's celebrate happy families. Have a great afternoon, cousins. We Are Family is coming up soon.